Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Deb Rivera.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar event where we will be showing you the new interactive charts on data.census.gov. This is your host, Deb Rivera, and today we will explore the newest feature on data.census.gov, chart creation, and this was developed in response to user feedback. So today we will have a step-by-step demonstration to show you how to easily create compelling visualizations directly on our platform. I want to take a moment and thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me and for helping to support our speaker today. Before I turn things over to our presenter, I do want to go over some housekeeping items. First, we would like to encourage you all to make use of the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions related to today's topic, please submit them through the Q&A panel and make sure to use the All Panelists option from the drop-down menu. This allows all of our panelists to see your question. At the end of the webinar, we will go over some of your most pressing questions that were submitted through the Q&A panel. A quick note, the question and answer session today will focus on the platform, data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on the data collection process, 2020 census products, methodology, and others. Now, just one more thing, we are recording the webinar today, and all of the materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. It is my pleasure now to introduce our speaker, Tyson Weister. Thank you so much, Tyson.
Great, thank you, Deb. And thank you all for joining this afternoon, new interactive charts on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister. I work in the Center for Enterprise Dissemination at the U.S. Census Bureau. We are the communications area for data.census.gov and our public API. So in December of 2024, we released a new feature and functionality that allows you to create charts on data.census.gov. We'd heard lots of feedback from users wanting more ways to visualize data. So what we're going to show here today is exactly how to do that. I'm going to give a brief introduction about charts, and then we're going to primarily do this in the live site. So I will show you a little bit of information, tips and tricks, and key details on screen in PowerPoint format, but most of the session today will be that live demonstration. You will have this recorded for you to follow along and as a resource afterwards, including slides that will have step-by-step clicks. We're going to start with the most basic chart you could try to create and then build and show you additional customization functionality and more types of detailed data sets you can make charts from as you go. All right, so for the charts on December 17th of 2024, that's when we released this new functionality that allows you to create charts. Currently, you can create bar, column, or line charts on our site. And with this, we rolled out a new tab. So you'll notice as you're navigating data.census.gov, there's a charts tab at the top between maps and profiles that follows you throughout the site. If you've used our maps before, you'll find that the process of making charts is similar in a lot of ways. So specifically, with the new ability to make charts, it means that you can make charts out of any data value that you see in one of our data tables. So all of our charts are based on the underlying tables, just like if you're trying to create a map on our site, it's also based on the data in the underlying tables. So it gives you the flexibility to create a chart out of any estimate that you see in a table, but it does mean that you need to know what table you're looking for in order to do that. So for the context of creating a chart, there's a few key steps involved. I'm typically going to be walking through these in this particular order, where you'll select your geographies or other key filters that may be needed to populate your chart, such as NAICS industry codes. After we do that, we're going to find a table on data.census.gov that contains data you want to make a chart out of. And then finally, we're going to go ahead to the last step is to create that customized chart. Again, you don't have to do the steps in this order, but because all of the charts are based on underlying data tables, I find it helpful to find the table and take a moment to look at the columns and rows of it first. These are the same strategies that I recommend for users trying to create maps on our site as well. All right, so let's take a look at this on the live site. For our first example, we're going to keep it real basic, as I mentioned. So we're going to show you the new charts tab at the top. That's your entry point into making a chart. And then I'm going to show you how to use the measures drop-down menu at the top of the chart in order to select the estimate out of the data table that you want displayed. For this example, we're going to make a chart showing the percent of people age 65 and over in 3 different states. I'm going to choose Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. So you'll want to get started by going to data.census.gov. And then I will go step by step through the search process. But we're going to be focusing primarily on charting and functionality. So do know that we have a wide range of educational materials that can help you learn how to find tables more in depth than what I'm going to explicitly explain today. And that will go hand in hand with your ability to create these customized charts. But to get started, I'm going to use the advanced search filters. On the left-hand side, I'm going to choose filters for the 3 geographies I'm interested first. So under the heading here, notice the filters have geographies, topics, years, codes. We're going to be using most of these categories at some point in the process today, and especially the geography section. So on the left-hand side, we'll click state. Then I'll choose Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. As we're working through the filter panels, we're always looking for a checkbox to make a final selection. And once we've made a selection, you'll see that they are added in the upper left. So we have our geographies for the chart. Now I would want to find a table that has data on people 65 and over. So on the left-hand side, I'll choose populations and people and age and sex. And it'll work to add that filter to the upper left. I'll confirm that I have the 1 topic filter, 3 geography filters, and then I'll click search in the lower right. Now here's where you'll notice there is a charts tab at the top that may be new if you haven't noticed it in the last couple of months. I recommend checking out the tables first. Again, the reason for this is we want to find a table that has data on the percent of people 65 and over, and then chart it from there. So there's 1,241 total tables on our site that have to do with age and sex for these 3 geographies, and that's why we want to be very certain that we're clicked into the table that has data we want to make a chart of. So you'll just read the columns and rows of your table to familiarize yourself with the layout. We see Alabama as a column. And scrolling to the right, we see a column for Florida, and then finally we'll see Georgia. So for each of these geographies, there's a column for the total number of people. And as we scroll to the right, we see corresponding percentages. And this table also happens to provide data for the total number of males, percent male, total number of females, and percent females. So there's actually 6 columns for each geography in this table. We're interested in the one that has percent. And then looking on the left-hand side, we see this table offers different detailed age categories first. And scrolling down, you'll see a section called Selected Age Categories. And eventually, when you get near the bottom of the table, you'll see 65 years and over. So as an example, we can see in Georgia, 15.4% of the population is 65 and over. Once you've familiarized yourself with data that you want to make into a chart and that you're found the correct table is when I would typically recommend going to the Charts tab. So from here, you'll go ahead and click Charts at the top. On the left, you'll want to make sure that you're still clicked into the table that has the data you want to make a chart of. In this case, it was S0101 we were looking at. And then we see a chart automatically provided to us for the 3 states that we've selected. The only thing is we have to tell the system, out of all of the estimates we just saw in that data table, which one do we want shown on our chart? You'll do that very similar to how you've been mapping items. So there's a drop-down menu at the very top of the chart. It says under 5 years. There's also a little arrow indicating that you can click here. And you'll see choose a measure to display. These are laid out in the same order that the rows of the data table were in. You'll scroll down. Remember, there was a selected age category section of the table, and then choose 65 years and over. And notice it's already set to %. So with that one click, in the background, our chart updated, and we can see these data 18.2% in Alabama, are 65 and over, 21.7% in Florida, and 15.4% in Georgia. All right, so that's pretty basic as far as making a chart. I wanted to expand on this and show you additional functionality and specifically highlight all of the options of the toolbar at the top. And we'll do this before we go on to creating more complex charts. For the toolbar, we already showed you the first item was the measures drop-down menu. Additional items that you will want to be aware of is the chart type button that allows you to switch between bar, column, and line charts. There's also a filters button that allows you to add or remove additional filters for your chart. So in this case, it would be adding or removing geographies that would be displayed. If your table's from the American Community Survey, you'll see a margin of error button, as well as notes, table, and map. And we're going to visualize those on the live site, so I won't talk in detail. But for this example, we're going to look at the total number of people 65 years and over in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, but I'm also going to add a couple states. So we'll add Mississippi and Tennessee. Right, so there's multiple ways that you could go about adding states. The one I wanted to show you is this convenient button that you see here at the top called Filters. Once you select that, any filters that are compatible with the table you're clicked into will be here on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll click into geographies. It gives you the different levels of geography you can choose from for the S0101 ACS one-year estimates table. I'll click on 040 state, and then we see checkboxes similar to how we selected this in the first place. So choosing Mississippi and Tennessee, it will add these filters in the upper left, so they will carry us or carry throughout the site as we navigate, but more importantly, they're right here on our screen. So when we made those selections, we see the chart has been updated. Couple other features, you can sort the information you're seeing in these charts. At the top, there's an option called sort by. I'm going to choose to sort in descending order. So we'll see very clearly Florida has the highest % 65 and over, and Georgia has the lowest. And then for this example, we also wanted to showcase not the %, but the total number of people 65 and over. You can make changes as many times as you want to the variable that you've selected in your chart. Click back in the top hand side of your screen where we selected the measure, and then you'll choose the measure that you want to display. So what I wanted to point out here, remember we looked at the table very methodically. We saw that there were 6 possible columns in the table for each geography. And when you go to the dimensions and units for these complex ACS and decennial census tables, that's where you'll see the option to specify which one of those columns were you referencing that you wanted on the chart. So remember the table had %, % male, and % female. those three columns shown in the dimensions drop-down menu. And then on the bottom, you can toggle between number and percent. So if you want to chart totals, you'll choose number. And if you want to chart percents, it'll automatically default to percents if your table has percents in them. And then you can switch again between the different columns. So these would be the remaining three columns that we could choose from. I'm going to leave it at total estimate and number. So this is going to give me the total number of people age 65 and over. That's still maintained from the last time I had selected it. And once we click off the menu, we can see the data have been updated. So this shows, again, not surprisingly, Florida has the highest number of people age 65 and over out of these states, and Mississippi has the lowest. Right, moving on to additional ways that you can look at these data. Chart type at the top allows you to switch between the different options. This will automatically generate with whatever options are compatible with the table you're clicked into. For most tables, that's going to be bar and column charts. So when you switch to columns, it will just show the bars the opposite direction. And line charts we'll discuss later. Those are available for data tables that show data over time. You also have a margin of error button. Once I click this, it will add in the margin of error into the view. So we can see plus or minus in the margin of error displayed. If you'd like them removed, touch the button again. There's also a notes button at the top that allows you to see the notes for the underlying data table. This typically has helpful technical links to documentation from the ACS website and other information about the survey. You'll also typically see here any special characters that you may see in the chart would be identified here. And then the last two options, the table button is very handy. It actually gives you a table just of the information that you made a chart out of. So we see just the population 65 years and over. You can highlight, copy this information, or download it. And then there's also the option if you want to go back to the giant S0101 table we started with to view the full table. And lastly, we've purposefully integrated to make this compatible as you navigate throughout the site. So really great to have this visual tool at your hands for creating charts. If you wanted to look at this visually in map format, click the map button at the top. And it's going to remember all of your selections. So not only the table you're clicked into, the geographies, but it even remembers that you chose the total number of people 65 years and over and just shows it to you in a different way. It makes it very seamless for you to switch between these different views and make the most of the visualization tools on data.census.gov. All right, so now that we've really comprehensively walked through the options that are available in the chart, let's move on to some more detailed types of charts you can create. The first one I wanted to show you is line charts. Those are obviously showing you data over time. For the American Community Survey, you're going to get line charts specifically from only their ACS one-year comparison profile product. So this is a special table from the ACS that shows data for up to 5 years in a single table view. And that table also has statistical significance. We've reflected that visually in the chart, which we'll talk about in more detail. So for this example, I'm going to look at the percent veterans over time living in North Carolina and Fayetteville metro area. Again, if you want the line chart from ACS, you have to use their comparison profiles. So we're going to use the 2023 most recent ACS one-year profile product. Here, I'm going to click in the upper left and choose US Census Bureau logo. That will start us fresh on the landing page. And then I'll choose Advanced Search. Just like before, we'll choose our geographies on the left-hand side. Looking for state and North Carolina. Then I'm going to be looking on the left for metro micro area. It will give us a list of them in alphabetical order. We can save ourselves time from scrolling by clicking into the box and choosing, typing Fayetteville and choosing Fayetteville, North Carolina metro area. And then again, you can find the table that you're interested in any way you choose. The first example, we searched by topic. For this example, I'm going to specify the ACS comparison profile product. So on the left, under the surveys heading, choose American Community Survey, 1-year estimates, and comparison profiles. I always like to confirm my selections in the upper left, 2 geographies and the product. I'll go ahead and click search. And again, I like to look at the table first. So I'm going to go ahead and choose very briefly to browse the table. The first option is CP02, comparative social characteristics in the United States. I mentioned these products provide estimates for up to 5 years in a single view. So we see that in the columns as we scroll left and right. And on the left-hand side, we see the different sections of the ACS table. So once you scroll down in this social characteristics table, you'll see a section called veteran status. And there is a civilian veterans row, and we can see 18.5% of the population in Fayetteville, North Carolina metro are veterans. So we found the table that has the data. We know it shows data over time, but how can we actually visualize this without having to look in just a table format? You guessed it, you'll click the charts at the top. Make sure on the left you're clicked into CP02. And this product from the ACS is beautiful. It shows the data in a line chart over time. So what it's showing is married couple household. Remember, we always have to tell the system out of all of the estimates in the table, which one do we want shown on our chart? And again, that's a pretty seamless process. Just click the measures drop-down menu at the top. Remember, we had to scroll down pretty far in the table to get to the veteran status section. These are in the same order of the rows. We see civilian veterans is clickable and that the site defaults to % in all cases when available. So we'll click civilian veterans, and in the background, our chart has already updated, and we'll take a moment to look at this. So it shows the 2 different geographies. In orange for Fayetteville, North Carolina metro, and in blue is the North Carolina state numbers. So pretty interesting. You can see this chart is showing higher % of the population who are veterans that live in the Fayetteville, North Carolina metro area compared to the % veterans in the state overall. That number's 18.5 compared to 7.3 at the state level. And what's nice is it shows this over time. So what we can see in Fayetteville is that the number or the % of veterans has been on the rise. So in 2019, 15.3% of the population were veterans, and in 2023, it's up to 18.5. This also shows, I mentioned statistical significance, and you'll see the legend at the bottom tells you how to read this. So your reference year is the one that's shown in diamond. So in this case, it's saying we're comparing whether something is statistically different from 2023 or not. And then when you look at the other estimates in the table, you'll note, or in the chart, you'll notice that any estimate that is in a closed circle, so in this case, solid orange or solid blue, are statistically different from the reference year. So that means that we are 90% confident that this is an actual difference in the population and not something that just happened to occur by chance, given that this is a survey and not 100% count. So in this case, we would read in 2022, the Fayetteville, New York, or North Carolina metro area value of 16.8% was statistically less than the value 18.5% in 2023. And then when you see values in open circles, here we see that means there's no statistical change. Even though you may see a difference in the numerical values, it is possible that this difference may have been by chance due to the fact that the data were collected through sample survey methods rather than 100% true counts. And then the last thing I'll note here for comparison profiles, you'll see a dashed line between 2019 and 2021. That is occurring because the 2020 estimates are not shown in this chart. Those were released as experimental products. And if you'd like to learn more, the link's at the bottom. All right, moving on, I wanted to show more detailed functionality for charts, moving away from demographic tables from programs such as the American Community Survey and Decennial Census to other types of tables we have on our site. So we're going to be looking specifically at economic tables. What I wanted to point out here is, by and large, a lot of what I've shown you is going to carry over, but these tables tend to have additional options for you. Specifically, the attribute or attributes that you want shown, those are certain context or categories that you want displayed in your chart, and you will specify them through the attributes. So for the tables I've shown so far, the attributes have been geographies only. When you start working with tables from economic data sets, you'll see a lot more attributes, things like showing a value broken out by NAICS industry code as an example. So the difference is you'll click into the drop-down menu for the primary attribute and you'll be able to choose things besides geography. You can choose to show up to 2 categories on the chart at the same time rather than just choosing geography or NAICS code. You can show both. And you can also choose to show a chart in the context of only one value of an attribute. So if I didn't want to see a chart for every 2-digit NAICS codes and just wanted to see a chart in the context of NAICS code 11, you could specify that in other available chart attributes. I know it's a lot of information to take in on a slide, so we're going to see on the live site how this actually works. But again, the most important thing to be mindful of is just be aware that there's additional options in the measures drop-down option. For this example, we're going to map out the number of employees across 2-digit NAICS codes in a few different states. I chose New York, Washington, and Wisconsin so we can see how employment compares in those states. For this example, we're going to be referencing the 2022 county business patterns. So back to the live site, we'll click the US Census logo. It starts us fresh, and I'm going to choose Advanced Search. You're probably noticing a pattern here. I like to choose my geographies first, so I'll choose state and mark the check boxes for New York, Washington, and Wisconsin. We'll see those filters in the upper left. And I'm going to use a new option that we haven't clicked into yet. Under the codes section on the left, I'll click Industry Codes NAICS. And I'm going to choose all 2-digit NAICS codes to give me an overall look across the major industries. But if you wanted to choose detailed codes, that's certainly available to you. Again, I'm choosing 2-digit NAICS to get them all. And we have multiple types of economic tables broken out by state and NAICS code. So here's where I'm going to go to select the county business patterns. On the left, economic surveys, business patterns, and then county business patterns. This is an annual program that provides data for the number of paid employees by different industry codes. It shows total number of establishments, employees, and payroll. Once I'm happy with my selections, I'm going to run the search in the lower right and click the tables at the top. This program releases one table per year with the most recent data, and our site tends to show the most recent data on top. So we see We're clicked into the 2022 County Business Patterns data set. I like to read the columns in rows, and especially for these economic tables, when you see tables returned to you that have thousands or hundreds of rows, definitely pay attention to the columns. And what I want to note here is on the right-hand side of these tables is where you will see a grouping of what are measures in the chart. So these are all right-aligned options. Notice the data are numerical values that are right-aligned in the column, and even the headings are right-aligned. So these are telling you their measures. Anything that's left aligned, which also tends to be grouped together on the left side of your tables, are attributes for your table. So for creating this table, each unique combination of attribute generates a row in this table. So we're not going to get too far in detail of that. What I wanted to point out primarily is if you want to know what these tables offer that you can chart, go to the right and look for the right aligned values. So we do see that this table provides number of employees. That's great. And it provides thousands of rows of different context of employees. So I'm going to go to charts, make sure we're clicked into the table that has the data we want to make a chart of. It would be the most recent county business patterns data table. And we'll give a few moments for this to load on screen. All right, so we had 3,000 rows of data. It is showing us 3 values in this chart. We can customize this to our liking, but by default, it's picking high-level information, and it's choosing the very first measure from the table, which was the number of establishments. So first thing I'm going to do is get this for a number of employees, and then I'm going to add in the NAICS context so that it actually shows me that in my chart. You'll do both of these things by clicking into the measure drop-down menu at the top. Remember those right-aligned options in the table, those show as measures, and we wanted to choose number of employees. So it's already updated that in the background. And then again, if you're still clicked into the measures option at the top, not only does it have measures, it also has the attributes. So in our previous tables, we would have seen geographic name, and that would have been it. But for this table, you can choose multiple attributes, all of those left-aligned columns in the table. You can choose to change this from geography to NAICS code. So when I do by NAICS, notice that in this case, it's just showing me a chart for New York. And as I scroll through, I see all of the different NAICS within that state. So great that that's an option. The reason it's choosing New York is because under other available chart options, it's set to New York by default. If I wanted to look at this chart for Washington, I could switch between and look one by one at each state. The beauty of these tables for economic data sets is there's primary and secondary attributes though. So if you wanted to show data for all states at once by NAICS code, you would choose one of them as a primary attribute and another one as a secondary attribute. So rather than show you data for one state at a time or one industry code at a time for all states, it's going to show it to you all at once. So that's kind of the difference between having something as a primary and secondary attribute versus having something selected in other available chart attributes. So let's look here at what this is giving. Because we have geography and NAICS industry code, we see them both here. I'm going to sort this in descending order. As you scroll through, you can see data for state and broken out by NAICS code. So let's take a look here at the top 3 industries employing people in New York versus Washington versus Wisconsin. We can see for New York, it's healthcare and social assistance, retail trade, and administrative and support and waste management and remediation services. The top 3 in Washington are healthcare and social assistance, retail trade, so similar to New York. And their third option, though, is accommodation and food services. And scrolling down for Wisconsin, we see their top industry is manufacturing for employing people in their state, followed by healthcare and retail trade. So this is very powerful, right? We were started at a table that had 3,000 rows and columns. It was difficult to read, but by just making a few clicks, we were able to provide this information in an easy to read format, sort it in descending order, and kind of glean some differences between the data. Right, so moving on to our last example, we talked about line charts for the ACS comparison profiles. I wanted to take a moment to show you an example of a line chart from an economic data set because they're a little bit different. So they tend to have more data over time to choose from than just a standard 5-year period. That means, one, that you'll typically see an area chart at the bottom of their line charts, and that allows you to see the full time period of data that you can choose to display in your chart, and then you drag the sliders in order to customize your chart view to the exact time period that you're interested in out of what's available. And then the second thing that you may see in some of our charts from economic surveys and programs, if that survey and program only covers US geographies, you'll see that the chart has indicated US recession periods in the gray bars. So for this example, I'm going to look at making a chart for the value of exports coming out of the Baltimore, Maryland port over time. This is an example that comes from our international trade data set. Again, just showing this for the functionality that you'll see in charts from economic tables, not just this particular data set, but across the board. To get started, I'll click on Advanced Search. And on the left, we've been working off of these primary geographies. They're the most common. There's an option to choose all geographies, and that's where you'll see less common options such as port. So here I'm going to click port. Prompts me to select an area, and then I need to choose from this list to get to the Baltimore port. So I could scroll down to it or click into the search bar at the top, type in Baltimore, and then choose the Baltimore, Maryland port. Great, so we have the geography we're interested in. Next, I'll go ahead and select the program on the left-hand side, Economic Surveys. You can choose to get export or import data. I'm going to look at export, and then choose the time series International Trade Monthly US Exports by port and harmonized system code. I'll go ahead and click search in the lower right and tables at the top. I get one table result. Again, this is a time series data, so they typically show all of the data in one table. On the right-hand side for economic tables, remember to scroll to the right. You see right-aligned columns and right-aligned values. This is the measure that you can glean from the particular table. So it shows a total value of exports for this port of 991 million for the month of October 2024. And this is where actually clicking into charts can help you see the data even more easily than trying to alter the table. But we'll go ahead and move on to that step at the top, choosing charts. And then again, you always need to click the table that has the data you want to make a chart of. This is showing us the total value of exports coming from the Baltimore port that we selected. And at the bottom is where you can see the area chart. So these data go back before January 2012, all the way up through, we can see October 2024 is the latest option. You can use the slider here. You'll just put your cursor over whichever one you want to drag. Click, hold, and drag right and left. Release the click, and it will work to update the time period that your chart is showing. So this is a really good visualization here. We can see, I'm sure many of you are aware of the incident that occurred in March for Baltimore. We can see some data showing how exports coming out of that port were affected and see that information over time. Also, just wanted to point out here, as a reminder, the filters option on the left, if you wanted to add different filters, in this case, geographies or export commodity codes, I'm just going to add in the data for all ports in the US. Anytime that you've selected more than just a handful of geographies at a time, it's still going to show them all to you. They're all going to be in gray, and we're going to be able to put our cursor over one of them, and it will show us in color which one we were looking at. So we'll give this a moment. It's pulling lots of data to show on screen. We'll give this a few more seconds to load up. Go ahead and click reload. And if that doesn't work, we'll just proceed anyways. I think you get the gist of what to expect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and proceed without the display and move back to the slides. What you would have seen is what we're showing here. And I've described to you where the information shows on your screen. You can see data for all the ports. It was kind of nice because you can put your cursor over the top and start hovering over different values and see which ports have the most exports by total value and which ports have less. And again, just another indication as to how you can interact with these charts in a way to start getting information that's more meaningful and much quicker than you would be able to in the table format. And then you could, of course, look at any one of these over time and see how things are changing. All right, so we want to make sure to allow time for questions that you all put in the chat that we can address over the line. I wanted to wrap up with some additional information before we open up. If you have questions about using charts or feedback on how we can make charts or anything else on data.census.gov work better for you, please let us know at census.data@census.gov or click the feedback option on the landing page. We also encourage you to sign up for email updates when you visit the link on the left or scan the QR code in the upper right. You can choose data.census.gov updates. This will subscribe you to major updates from our program, including our monthly newsletter that has the latest educational opportunities, data releases, and system enhancements to help you make the most of data.census.gov. And we encourage you to get more practice using the site. We offer hands-on workshops online free of charge. There's 3 for data.census.gov. One is basic, advanced, and then mapping on our site. We also offer a workshop on using the microdata access tool to create custom tables, and another workshop on using the census application programming interface. So these are really great because they're anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length. You'll get live demonstration opportunity for hands-on exercises. You'll be able to work through them independently, but then also come back together as a group to make sure you all got the solution. We offer these each month, so if you do not see when you visit this page a time slot that currently works for your schedule, we would encourage you to continue to check back for one that will pop up that will meet your needs. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Deb. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Tyson. So in a few moments, we will start going some of the questions that we received through the Q&A panel. You still have time to submit questions though, so feel free to do that. But before we dive into your questions, I want to let you know that we have set up a quick evaluation survey, and that will pop up automatically when you exit the WebEx session today. So when you see that survey window, just please take a moment to share your thoughts with us. We would love to hear what worked well, what we could do better, and especially any other topics that you are interested in learning about in future webinars. And again, that survey will appear right after you close out of WebEx. So please keep an eye out for it. Don't close the window. Your feedback really helps us make these sessions more valuable for everyone. Now, if you have any questions remaining after our session concludes today, or if you would simply prefer to email us your question, please feel free to reach out to any of the email inboxes listed here, depending on your needs. If you are a member of the media, you may contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. And for general data.census.gov questions from the public or for training requests, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. We would love to hear from you. All right, so now we can go ahead and move on to the questions that we have received. Tyson, we received several excellent questions through the Q&A panel. If you are ready, I'm going to read them out loud for you. Is that okay?
Yes, sounds good.
Perfect. All right. So the first question is there a way to copy and paste or download the charts into Word, Excel, or some other format?
I'm so glad that someone asked this question. So I did want to share here, I'll go back to the chart that's now loaded. If you wanted to save this, we don't have an export option currently available. So what I would do is encourage you to take a screenshot using your favorite screen grabbing software. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, if you want to save the chart, share it with someone else, you can grab the URL from the address bar. And once you share it with a colleague, it's going to take some time to load up if you're sharing a large one, but it's going to load the exact same view that you had before. So do know that grabbing the URL from the address bar, and then again, we would encourage you to take a screenshot. We certainly consider additional enhancements as well, so we would jot that down as a request for our tracking. Thank you for asking.
Yep. Thank you so much for asking that question. All right, so the next one that we have is there an option in the charts to show both the number and the percentage?
So currently, no, there are options to show them separately. So either you could chart out the total number or the total percent, but those would be two separate charts. And percents, by the way, again, they're only available if the underlying table that you're making a chart from shows the data in percent format.
Great, thank you so much for clarifying that. And again, thank you for the question. Another question that we received, and I know this one might be, it depends, but just wanted to mention it and read it out loud for you, Tyson. What is the most recent year of data?
Yeah, so it depends is definitely a good answer. We keep a up-to-date listing of data sets available on data.census.gov. So I did just want to point that to you and take a moment to mention our help resources while we're talking about that. So on the landing page, if you click the help button directly under the single search bar, it will take you to our suite of educational materials to help you make the most of data.census.gov. You'll also find some of the things I mentioned today, such as our workshops when you hover over events. But what I wanted to show you is under guidance, there are frequently asked questions. And one of the questions is which data sets are available. And that is the one that will show you under data availability. a detailed listing of the most recent available data that are on data.census.gov, and the left shows you what survey or program it's coming from. So generally speaking, the American Community Survey, most recent, is 2023. We have data up through the 2020 census. And then for some of our economic data, you'll see 2022 and 2023 are some of the more recent offerings. So on a high level, I think this answers your question. And if you have a specific survey or program that you're interested in, would encourage you to check this out as well.
All right, thank you. Now, I am seeing this question quite a bit, and it is, will a replay be available for this presentation? And Tyson, if you don't mind me taking that one, we are recording the webinar today. So the PowerPoint slides, the recording, as well as a transcript will all be available through the Census Academy website. You should be able to see that available within usually 3 to 5 business days. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer, but it will be available. So please keep checking back. All right, so the next question is, how should the charts be cited as a bibliographic reference?
I love it. Another great question. So I'm going to take a moment to go back to the site and bear with me with my open tabs. The best thing that's currently built into the site is if you click back on tables. Make sure, of course, that you're still clicked into the table that shows the data you want to make a chart, or you made a chart from. And under the table tools, you'll see a cite button. Your question makes me wonder if we could also include this in other parts of the site. But once you click cite, it will give you a citation for the data already in the major formats for you: MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard. So this would be your best bet, in my opinion, to cite data, even if it's from a chart. It's all based on the underlying table data. So I would still point you to this information. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, great question. All right, our next question reads, can you create a chart comparing certain attributes as part of a shared whole? For example, showing the share of all tracked population out of the county's population as a whole.
That's a great question as well. We don't currently have that type of functionality built in. So for ACS and decennial census tables, which is the only tables that are compatible with census tracts, they only have geographies as a selectable attribute, and there's no way to roll it up in the way you're describing. So we would currently just kind of consider that as a possible future enhancement we could consider. I know we've had other requests from those tables of wanting, things to be able to add up to 100% and to be able to show that. So definitely appreciate the suggestion.
Yep, we certainly appreciate that question. And then the last question that we will address today, and it is about the data availability chart. If we can share the URL for that data availability chart, and certainly we can. I'm not sure if you want to cover it a little bit more, Tyson, show where it is on the site.
Oh, sure. So again, just recommend the help button directly under data.census.gov. There's lots of great information from our resources page. This is actually going to be my next slide to close out. So while I'm here live, I'll just mention a few additional items. Our webinars are recorded, so you'll see other data.census.gov webinars here that we've put on recently, as well as our monthly webinar upcoming. Again, the workshops that we encourage you to join in for hands-on practice, information about our releases. So if you have been following data.census.gov closely, in our updates section is where you would have noticed in December that we released the charts functionality. We describe new features as we release them, as well as latest data releases. And then again, the last thing that I think would be helpful to share in the chat probably a general link to this FAQ. I'll leave that to my colleagues to drop that in the chat so they can do it a lot more efficiently than I would. There are lots of answers to your frequently asked questions, and the one that was discussed today was this data availability chart. It's what data are available in data.census.gov. This opens up a PDF that my colleague diligently keeps up to date with each data release that happens.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that, Tyson, and I will be sending that out in the Q&A panel in just a few moments, but I wanted to thank you all for the great questions that we received. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions today. If we did not have time to address your question, we do encourage you to send us an email at census.data@census.gov. We absolutely would love to hear from you. All right, and with that, Tyson, I will turn it back over to you to close us out.
All right. We've been on the resource page. This is a direct link that will take you to that, as well as a QR code. We encourage you to email us, both for feedback and questions. Also, if you have training requests for data.census.gov or the API, we're the team from the Census Bureau that specializes in that. So we have some contact information here for you, as well as our team of data dissemination specialists. They are located throughout the country, and there is someone assigned to your state. So if you represent a local organization and want to make a connection with your data dissemination specialist, they also provide training, including hosting this training that's happening today. You can reach out to them for data assistance and training requests using the contact information at the right, census.askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. Again, thank you all so much, Deb. I don't have anything else. I appreciate you all joining in for the webinar today.
Great, thank you all so much. We hope to see you in a future webinar. Please take care and don't forget to fill out that survey evaluation that we have for you. So thank you all again for joining us. Have a good afternoon.